Welcome to my channel. Today is going to be, I'm so excited. I'm so excited for this video. I have been having so much fun shopping my stash trying to dupe the Natasha Denona Tropic palette. Before I jump into the dupes, I want to take a moment to just kind of discuss Natasha Denona because it's like a tenuous topic, because if you buy Natasha Denona, most likely you're really passionate about her as either a makeup artist, which I am like totally behind. I think she's an awesome, very talented makeup artist. Or you're probably like a brand buyer. Like you love Natasha Denona's line. You're really impressed with what she does. You're really like loving and supportive of her brand, which I totally hear you on that. Like, and to kind of like give some backstory, like I own the Natasha Denona Sunset palette and I bought this with my own money. I've done like a tutorial on my channel with it. I think it's a beautiful eyeshadow palette for sure. And I think it's very high quality. It definitely has some very beautiful blendable mattes and then has really stunning shimmers. However, Natasha Denona's products are not known for their affordability. On the contrary, they're known for being insanely expensive. Natasha Denona's palettes go for $129, and or at least the palettes that are about this size. Like she has even more expensive palettes with more colors that are in the $200, $239, $259 range. So it doesn't mean that they're bad palettes or that I'm saying like, hey, this is a crap palette, so let's find a dupe for it. No, what I'm trying to say is like, what better palette to try and find a dupe or to shop your stash for than an extremely expensive palette? Because most people don't want to spend $129 on a makeup palette, and some people can't afford it to begin with. It's just not an option. So rather than trying to find a dupe or shop my stash for something in the $40 to $50 palette range, I thought it would be cool to try and dupe a palette that is out of a lot of people's budget. With that disclaimer said, like I'm not anti-Natasha Denona. I own one of her palettes and I love it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with spending $129 on an eyeshadow palette if that's what you want to do. So with that all said and everything, I like want to dive into shopping my stash and what I found and like what I think. So I'm going to insert photos of the Tropic palette so that you guys are able to see the color story and kind of know what I'm talking about. I don't own the Tropic palette. I don't plan to purchase it. However, I have swatched it in Sephora and it was a very, like it's pretty and the mattes felt dry but pretty well pigmented, and then there were like differing performance, like the shimmers performed differently. I'll try and reference that because I was trying to think of like how the colors were swatching whenever I was thinking about how I would dupe them. So I have 4 palettes that I think are almost complete color story dupes for the Natasha Denona Sunset palette. Oh, sorry, Tropic palette, for the Tropic palette. So palette number 1 that I think is a really good option to do like a dupe look for if you own it is the Morphe Jaclyn Hill palette. So I chose this palette because the top 2 rows in the Tropic palette are just nice, warm neutrals. You've got some browns, you've got some pinks, you've got some like kind of peachy tones. And I thought that that is pretty well represented in the Jaclyn Hill palette, especially in these 2 rows over here, and then this portion down here. And then the fun pops of color for the Tropic palette are in the bottom last row. And there is that Laguna, which is like a bright blue shade that I think is pretty similar to a combination of these. Now Laguna is matte, so I would definitely say that the shade Jada is your best bet for duping it almost totally. And then Pool Party is fun because you get sort of like the version of the shade but shimmer. Now there is not a shade in here that is like the mint icy blue green shade that's in the bottom left corner of the Tropic palette, but this shimmery green is actually kind of like, it can be sheared out a little if you mix it with Pool Party. So I think you could take these 2 together and kind of try and make your own version of that mint shade. And then this mint, or this shade, which by the way is called Diva. Diva on its own mixed with some of this green could kind of be like an emerald shade, which there's like a really pretty emerald shade in the bottom of the Tropic palette. I hope I was in frame. Sorry, I was pointing at, if you mix these two shades together, then I think you could almost get an emerald. So putting this as your base and putting this on top, you get like a nice shimmery green. But overall, I think that you can have similar color stories with using the Morphe Jaclyn Hill palette in lieu of the Tropic palette. I was really struck by the purple shade. That's like a very unique shade. I tried to find a lot of single shadows similar to it, and I landed on the Metal Matte palette by Kat Von D, which is unfortunately a limited edition. So if you don't own this, it's not an option to buy. But if you do own this, there are some unique shades in here. So the shades that I'm thinking of that are really good for duping the Tropic palette in here are Ribbon and Silk, are similar to that, particularly Silk, but like depending on how you use Ribbon, it could also be very similar. They're similar to that kind of pastel purple in the bottom row. And there's also a matte yellow, and there's like a shimmery yellow in the Tropic palette. And I have looked like high and low to try and find something super similar to it, and I couldn't. But my like middle ground is to use Feather and then put a like a sheer kind of shimmer shade on top of it. Also, the shade Ignite in here is extremely similar to the mint shade in the Tropic palette, and you also get a really beautiful blue shimmer that is in the bottom row of the Tropic palette, and you could use Watt as your emerald green. If you own the Metal Matte palette, this is a terrific option. And the quality is there with this one. Like the mattes are beautiful, the shimmers are great. So definitely think about trying to reach for this palette if you're trying to get a look that seems like it might have come from the Tropic palette. So there are two more palettes that I feel like have very similar color stories. Number one is the ColourPop Dream Street palette by Kathleen Lights. And the reason that I picked this one is because you have the blues in here. You have a shimmer, and then you have a matte blue, which is beautiful. And you have this shade, I think that one's called Water Bear. No, this is Kaleidoscope. This shade right here, which seems like a silvery shimmer, but once you put it on, it actually has some blue undertone, so it's made perfectly for layering with these guys. And I think if you put this on top of that, you would create the perfect dupe look for using that mint shade on top of a dark blue. Now, I don't think that the blues in here are like total, like there's no Laguna shade in here. They're not like a navy, you don't have an emerald, but the color story is very similar because you have a lot of warm tones and then you have those like blue oceany tones. And so if you already own this, I think you can get a similar look to what the Tropic palette is doing. And it's $16, so I mean, you could buy this, and then I've got some single shadows I've picked, and you could probably almost totally dupe the palette. March's Boxycharm, there was a pure palette, and it is a bunch of peachy tones, a brown, a shimmery black, this sort of like purpley pink, and then this bright blue. So the blue made me instantly think of Laguna. And then the purpley pink kind of was making me think of that purple down on the end, and also just like there's pink undertones there, which there's a lot of like pinky colors in the top two rows of the Tropic palette. So I was thinking the color story here, particularly with this nice bright blue, is very reminiscent of the Tropic palette. And if you subscribe to Boxycharm, you could kind of test out how you feel about using a bright blue shadow with this pure palette. And then if you feel like, all right, yeah, I like this blue, I've like had my fun with the blue and I want more, then you could consider buying the Tropic palette. Or if you're like, like blue is just not my thing, I can't pull this off, then if the blue is what caught your eye about the Tropic palette, then now you kind of like know that it's not your thing. But these two rows here totally remind me of the neutral shades in the Tropic palette. So I thought this was kind of fun, especially if you're a Boxycharm subscriber. Like this month you're getting something kind of similar to that story that Tropic is telling. I also have an Urban Decay palette. This is limited edition. It's the Jean-Michel Basquiat palette. The Tenant palette is what it is. There was a neutral palette and then a colorful one. And the colorful one, in my opinion, is like, I mean, this is like a crazy good option for trying to recreate those shades. So I was able to play with the dark blue and this shade right here, that like bright blue, to me is like the closest I could find to Laguna. Then there's an emeraldy green in here, and there's a pretty like dusty sort of dark grungy purple. So there's a lot of similarities to the Tropic palette in here. And I know that this is not available anymore because it's limited edition, but Urban Decay releases a lot of limited edition colorful palettes. And right now, the Kristen Leanne palette, I think it's like $19, and it has almost all of these shades in it. Like it has a really dark bright blue and a really like turquoisey bright blue as well. And they're super pigmented, and that palette is like very high quality and it's on sale. So although this is what I own that I reached for to dupe the Tropic palette, there are things by Urban Decay on the market currently that you could pull for and dupe the Tropic palette, and like it's totally doable. I mean, it's so doable, and you don't have to buy that expensive palette. Next thought I had for duping is that if our cost to beat is $129, you can buy multiple palettes and single shadows and still not even be close to $129. So that made me think of the Just Peachy Mattes palette, which is all matte, obviously, and it has purpley tones, it has those browns that are in the Tropic palette, and it also has these stunning, like perfect peachy browns, peachy neutrals, and I just thought that this is like a perfect collection of options for those neutral rows in the Tropic palette, and this is a pretty popular palette, so you might already own this. So my thought process behind pulling this, obviously it doesn't have blues or anything kind of funny with it, is that you pick this as your neutral palette and then we add single shadows. And I'm gonna get to the single shadows I picked. So remember, the Just Peachy Mattes is an option. Is the Modern Renaissance. I mean, you have like pinks and peachy tones down here and browns and an orange. So like this could also be your neutral and warm tone palette that you pair with some single shadows. And the single shadows that I found in my collection that I thought are somewhat similar to Tropic shades. These top two blues are to dupe the mint shade, and this is Venice by Anastasia Beverly Hills, and this is Icy by Anastasia Beverly Hills. So these two shades I thought were very similar to the look that you would probably get from Icy. Oh, sorry. This is Icy. This is Icy. This is Venice from Mint. So Icy is more sheer and blue, like an icy blue. And then Venice is more of a teal tone turquoise, and it is less sheer. And I swatched the Mint shade in the Natasha Denona palette, and I can tell you right now, it is more similar to Icy. The Venice shade is just a little more green, like Minty is more of a, it's a sheer shimmer. Icy doesn't give you a ton of pigment at first, but it can be like built up. So Venice is the more vibrant shade and Icy is the more pale, light, sheer shade, but they're both very like doable options. And if you add a little Fix Plus, I mean, that Icy shade can get you pretty much exactly where you want to be. And then I picked two. This option is called Silver Lining by ColourPop, and this is to dupe the purpley tone in the bottom row of Tropic. And then I picked Dusty Rose by Anastasia because there's sort of a mauvey color in the top, I think it's in the top row of the Tropic palette. It's like a mauve, it's not peach and it's not totally pink, and so I picked Dusty Rose as a dupe option. To reflect sort of like the warm tone pinks, I picked Soft Core right here. And then I also picked Intense Gaze by Anastasia Beverly Hills for like a warmer tone neutral. And then for an orangier tone neutral, I picked China Rose and Orange Soda, both by Anastasia Beverly Hills, with Orange Soda being the matte shade. So these are some single shadows if you're looking for a specific warm tone to your repertoire, or like trying to find a good dupe for some of the warm tones in the Tropic palette. But then these are trying to dupe the more unique shades in the palette, and I think they do a pretty good job. I also used, so NARS has single shadows, and these are like $29 a piece, but in lieu of buying such a pricey palette, you could buy one of these singles. And I picked the color Voss. This to me is the ultimate dupe for the mint shade. So it is, I mean, it's like beautiful. It is so pretty and metallic, and it's like minty, icy blue. Oh, like I love this. It's actually what's in the middle of my eyes today. And I love this shade. So the thought process would be that you take what you own, like take a warm neutral palette, and then add on some of the more unique single shadows that are blue and get you those like funky kind of like more unique shades. So like take what you own and use that, and then splurge for like a fun single shadow. Then you save a bunch of money and you expand your ability to have cool, unique looks with what you already own. I pretty much just, to do my eyes, I used the blues from the Tenant palette, the NARS blue that I just showed you, and I used the peach palette for the warm parts of my transition and my under eye. So with these 3 products, I was able to get the look that I would have reached to do if I owned the Tropic palette. And all 3 of these things combined do not add up to the cost of the Natasha Denona palette. So just for some perspective. Now I have gone over my palettes and I've gone over some of the single shadows that were in my collection, but I wanted to also discuss some things I don't own that I looked at that I think would be really great dupe options for this palette and would be something to consider if you're looking to seriously dupe the palette. So I'm gonna read off the list I've got and insert photos for reference. If you want to dupe the shimmery yellow, that is the toughest shade that I tried to dupe. Like I could not find something that looked like a sheer, shimmery, very pale yellow. So the closest I got was to go with very pale light golds. And I chose So Pale by Makeup Geek, Voltage by Makeup Geek, Soft Gold by Anastasia Beverly Hills, and 10 Karat Gold by Anastasia Beverly Hills. So the Anastasia shades are 12 a piece, and the Makeup Geek, I think they're 6. The Anastasia shades can go on sale if you buy them during the VIB sale that's coming up in the spring, or if you buy them during Black Friday, they're on sale. You can buy 4 of them for $40. Sometimes they go on, like I've bought all of my Anastasia singles for $5 because they go on flash sale. So keep your eyes out on that. Then for duping the pastel mid-tone purple that's at the end, I had a few options. There's ColourPop Daddy, and that's a Super Shock shadow. Then Makeup Geek Hopscotch and Wisteria are 2 very similar shades. And I think the ColourPop shade is $5, and I think like the Makeup Geeks are $5 or $6. And then for the mint shade, we obviously have like the NARS in Voss that I told you about, which, I mean, this is very pricey. It's $29, but it's still like nowhere near the cost of that palette. And then I have ColourPop Sugar, which is a Super Shock shadow, and ColourPop Coconuts are 2 really pretty shades that you could buy to kind of be like that mint shimmer. And Luckfully is another ColourPop shadow that I thought was similar. And then for the bright blue that's like, I think it's called Laguna, I said Sugar Pills Single Shadow Kimchi, which I think is $13. Looks very similar. And then there's ColourPop Zoom Ship, which is a Super Shock shadow. So I thought those were really awesome options. And then for some palettes, there's the Violet Voss Like a Boss palette, and that has some of the warm tones in it. And it has gold and green, so if those were catching your eye. It does not have any blue though, but it's like you get all of those like neutral warm tones that were at the top rows, and then you get like a gold that sort of looks like it could do like the job of that yellow shimmer, and then like a really pretty green. But again, it does not do blue, so if the blue is not interesting to you, the Like a Boss Violet Voss palette would probably be something to consider, and it's $45. if the blues are what you're all about, then you could look at the Kat Von D I Am Divine palette, and that has some blue in it. It also has like a black, a really pretty silver that you could put on top of the blue to probably get the effect of that mint shade. And that is $38 unlimited edition. And then there's the I think like the final palette that I think is like almost like a perfect dupe is called the Magic Palette by Juvia's Place. And it has like a kind of a shade that looks like it's sort of minty. It has a green, it has a blue, it has some warm tones. It's got all the pops of color that you would probably be looking for from the Tropic palette without being anywhere close to the gloss. It's really fun to shop your stash and to play with what you have and see how you can use things. Oh no, my cat's gonna eat my tulips. Scarlet. Sorry guys, Scarlet has to come visit. You can shop through what you already own and have fun with that and not necessarily have to buy a brand new palette. But if you want to buy a brand new palette, you always can, like, as long as it doesn't sell out. I mean, it's always there. But this year for me, I've been really enjoying using using what I have. Like, I doubt I'll ever use like a palette like this up. Like, I can't imagine hitting pan on this Laguna shade, but I really enjoyed pulling these palettes out and like creating the looks that I would with the Tropic palette, but not having to spend the money, and like also getting like a test drive of like, is that a look that I actually look good in? Does that work for me? Is it something that I'm happy with the results? And I had a lot of fun. But let me know what you think of the things I picked to dupe the Tropic palette, and let me know if there's any other palettes you'd like to see me dupe in the future. I hope that you had fun looking at what I pulled, and like I hope that, you know, some of the things that I found remind you that there's a lot of options out there to get these looks for less, and it can be really fun to go looking. So yeah, I hope you have a great day or night, whatever time it is for you, and I look forward to seeing you in a new video soon. Bye!